In 1906, San Francisco was the jewel of the American West, the 9th largest city in the United States, a boomtown that had survived the gold rush, the Comstock lode, and the railroad barons. Its population had quadrupled in 30 years. Its banks held the fortunes of the Pacific. Its opera house hosted Caruso. 4 days before the Earth split, the Miles brothers mounted a camera on the front of a cable car and filmed a trip down Market Street. The footage is silent. The footage is grainy. The footage is hypnotic. Streetcars jostle with horse-drawn wagons. Pedestrians dart between lanes. A postal automobile putters past the Oddfellows Hall. The camera sways gently, as if the city itself were breathing. That footage is a ghost. A city captured on the edge of annihilation. The San Andreas Fault runs 800 miles through California. For thousands of years, it had been locked, straining, building pressure, waiting. In 1906, the pressure exceeded the strength of the rock. At 5:12 a.m. on April 18th, a foreshock hit. 20 to 25 seconds later, the main rupture began. Offshore, just 2 miles west of the city. Within 30 seconds, the shaking had swept through the entire Bay Area. The earth did not tremble. The earth tore. The San Andreas Fault ruptured 296 miles, from San Juan Bautista to Cape Mendocino. For comparison, the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake had a rupture length of just 25 miles. The ground moved horizontally by as much as 32 feet. The shaking was felt from southern Oregon to Los Angeles, inland as far as central Nevada, an area of 200,000 square miles, nearly 8 times the area of the 1989 earthquake. The rupture traveled north at 8,300 miles per hour, 15 times the cruising speed of a Boeing 747. Buildings collapsed, gas mains ruptured, water mains shattered. The Palace Hotel, the largest hotel in the world, survived the shaking, but its walls cracked. The City Hall dome, which had cost $6 million and taken 30 years to build, crumpled like paper. A man named Fred Hewitt was standing near City Hall when the earthquake began. He later wrote, "I was within a stone's throw of that City Hall when the hand of an avenging God fell upon San Francisco. The ground rose and fell like an ocean at ebb tide. Then came the crash. To me it seemed an eternity. The earthquake lasted less than a minute. Then came the fire. Within minutes of the shaking stopping, fires broke out across the city. At least 50, possibly more than 100. Broken gas lines fed the flames. Fallen chimneys scattered embers. The water mains were shattered. The fire department had no water to fight with. Perched on top of hills and built largely of wood, the entire city was kindling. The fire spread like nothing the city had ever seen. In his letter home to Australia, immigrant carpenter Percy Gregory wrote, "The flames spread like fury, jumping 6 and 7 blocks at once." There was no coordinated response. The fire department tried to fight, but without water, without their chief, without a plan. The army was called in. General Frederick Funston, a Medal of Honor recipient who had fought in the Philippines, took command. His decision, made in desperation, would become one of the most controversial in San Francisco history. The plan was simple: use dynamite to create fire breaks. Blow up buildings in the path of the fire to stop it from spreading. The idea had worked in Baltimore 2 years earlier, but in San Francisco there were no competent persons. No one, not the soldiers, not the firefighters, not the city officials, really knew how to use explosives to fight a fire. The army sent 48 barrels of gunpowder to the mayor's office. Neither the mayor nor his officials knew the difference between gunpowder, dynamite, and nitroglycerine. The first explosions sent burning debris raining down on neighboring blocks. the fire jumped the fire breaks. The fire spread faster than before. In the chaos, the order was given to evacuate neighborhoods, and in doing so, the city deprived itself of volunteer fire brigades, desperate men willing to fight for their own homes. The dynamiting continued for 3 days. By the time it stopped, the fire had destroyed 490 city blocks and 25,000 buildings. Some 250,000 people were homeless. The death toll, initially reported as 375, would later be revised upward to more than 3,000. Arnold Jenth, a photographer who had captured the city's elite in his studio, walked the ruins. He photographed charred corpses, twisted streetcar tracks, the skeletal remains of the Palace Hotel. His images are the visual record of a city erased. 250,000 people, more than half the city's population, were now homeless. They slept in parks, in empty lots, on the beach. The army set up tent cities at the Presidio. Golden Gate Park became a village of tents and shacks made from burned timber. In the refugee camps, people improvised. The photograph collections from UC Berkeley show women washing clothes in tubs, men cooking over fires on the ground, families sitting down to eat at carefully set tables in the middle of the street, with ruins visible in the background. Captain George Bernard Mousson of the SS Henley, a British steamer at port during the earthquake, turned his ship into a floating refugee camp. He wrote to his mother 3 days after the quake, "If you picture the scenes described and imagine the horrors 1,000 times greater, you will still know less than I have personally witnessed." He described the thousands of homeless people he took aboard. An old lady who saved only her umbrella and a cage of pet canaries, motherless children, childless women, the old and young together, high-born and low-born, united by catastrophe. He wrote, "I have been condensing day and night and have supplied tens of thousands with water to drink." The wealthy and the poor stood in the same bread lines. The city's elite, the Hearsts, the Stanfords, the Crockers, lost fortunes. The working poor lost everything and had nothing to rebuild with. As winter approached, the city faced a second disaster. Tents would not shelter people through the cold, wet winter. The San Francisco Relief Corporation, a joint effort of the Army, the Parks Commission, and private donors, commissioned a fleet of small wooden cottages. They built 5,610 of them. Some 16,000 people lived in them. The cottages were simple, 1 or 2 rooms, about the size of a modern garden shed. They were painted green, not for aesthetics, but because the army had surplus paint. Residents paid $2 a month in rent, which went toward the purchase price of $50. Once a family had paid off the cottage, they had to move it. The city did not want permanent settlements of shacks. People dragged their little green cottages through the streets on horse-drawn carts. Some ended up in the outer districts, the Richmond, the Sunset, Bernal Heights. More than 100 survive today. In San Francisco's absurd real estate market, one sold in 2017 for $849,000. They are called earthquake shacks. They are the city's smallest, strangest monuments. But in 1907, they were not curiosities. They were hope. The rebuilding of San Francisco is one of the most remarkable stories in American urban history. Within 3 years, the city was largely rebuilt. Its population recovered. Its economy roared back. But the recovery was not without cost. The city's leaders, eager to reassure investors, to restore confidence, to erase the image of ruin, actively downplayed the role of the earthquake. They blamed the fire. They blamed the dynamite. They blamed everything except the ground beneath their feet. The new buildings were taller. The new population was larger. And the San Andreas fault was still there, still locked, still waiting. The 1906 earthquake and fire killed more than 3,000 people. It destroyed 490 city blocks. It left 250,000 homeless. It caused an estimated $350 million in property damage, more than $10 billion in today's money. But the earthquake also produced something else: scientific knowledge. The Lawson Report, published in 1908, remains one of the most important studies of a single earthquake ever conducted. It established the elastic rebound theory of earthquake mechanics. It laid the foundation for modern seismology. And the earthquake produced a different kind of knowledge, the knowledge that cities are fragile, that nature is indifferent, and that the people who survive disasters are not heroes or villains. They are just people. The Miles brothers film is a ghost. 4 days before the earthquake, they shot that footage. They shipped the negative by train to New York. It arrived on April 17th, one day before the fire would have destroyed it. The people in that film, the woman in white, the sailor-suited boy, the businessman raising his hand to hail the cable car, most of them survived the earthquake. Some of them did not. The film does not distinguish. It preserves them all, frozen in a moment when the world still made sense.